You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
And away we go, presented by Bet365. It's the Monday edition of Leafs Morning Take. Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill with you. What's going on, Rosie? How was your weekend, buddy?
What's happening, dude? It was good. I was at a Pee Wee hockey tournament in Medicine Hat, Red Cliff, Alberta, actually. And it was good. I got to listen to that game on the radio while I was driving. And I don't know if you get the full sense of what's going on when you're listening on the radio, it's kind of a different way to hear or be involved in a hockey game. But sure seems like the whole Leafs nation has taken a turn to negative town, doesn't it?
Yeah, surprise, surprise. And lucky for me, I actually took in that game against the Vancouver Canucks. And I mentioned this on Saturday when I did a crossover with Canucks Conversation and David Quadrelli. As soon as I heard there were travel woes for the Vancouver Canucks, I just knew the Maple Leafs were in trouble in that game. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, NATION, all in uppercase today. Don't forget our Super Chat charity partner this season is Sick Kids. Want to make sure that your question or comment gets on the show. Hit us up with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat will go to Sick Kids, ranked the #1 research-intensive children's hospital in Canada and 3rd in the world. What kind of hockey dad are you, by the way? Are you the guy who just sits quietly? Are you the guy who used to be in the NHL and tells everybody they used to be in the NHL? Or are you very vocal out there?
I'm the second one. Reminding everybody about the cup.
I'm in the show, baby. I was in the show.
No, I'm a coach. I'm always helping out.
Yeah.
I don't like the head coach thing. I don't like to organize everything and make all the decisions and practice plans, but I like to be out there when I see something, try to relay some information, make the kids better. And we've got a good group of kids on both of my boys' teams this year, a good group of parents. It's pretty chill. It's good. And it's getting to the point where they're playing actual hockey. Like they had a tournament this weekend, and it's just we're structuring it, and there's neutral zone regroups, and there's breakouts, and there's power play, and it's getting really fun when the kids are starting to take to it, and instead of just skating around circles and U9, they're trying to skate through 5 guys' feet, and some kids can do it, so they think they can do that in U13, and then it blows up in their face, and they got to have an adjustment period, or hopefully have that. But it never ceases to amaze me when people get fired up and parents are getting kicked out, and it blows my mind. There's something weird about hockey, man, where I don't know, it just tempers and all sense of being logical and rational sometimes goes out the window, and it's certainly not me. I don't know if it's because I played a bit or what, but I just sit there and kind of smile like the world doesn't come to an end if there's a bad penalty called, and it's just, I don't know, it blows my mind. But it is intense, and I'm right in the thick of it, but I'm enjoying it.
Are there drop passes on the power play in that age level, or?
No, we try to stay away from that stuff at a young age for good reason.
Oh, man, there's just so much to dive into on today's podcast. You got a couple of big-time guests as well. But from Leafs practice, I guess, happening right now, Yanni Hakanpää is practicing. Yeah, your boy. He's played 2 games so far as a Maple Leaf. Going to play at the Four Nations, named to the Finnish roster. But the first time he's participating in an actual practice with the club since the procedure on his knee following his 2nd game this season, which memory serves me about a month and a half ago. So he's back in the mix here, Rosie.
That's interesting. I don't know. I had, I guess I had high hopes. I don't know if they're that high, but I was excited and hopeful that he could make an impact. Big guy like that with an ability to play and a history with experience, right-handed shot. I was thinking this could be something pretty solid. And then right away after the signing, question marks galore, and they haven't gone away. Lo and behold, he gets into a couple games, doesn't look great, understandably so, being as he's been out of the lineup for so long. I think it goes back to like March or something, correct? So
yeah,
that's tough, but I don't know. Is he going to be a factor? Who knows? I think it's unlikely, but the fact that we'll get another chance to look at him, see what he's like. Obviously, he wasn't in a good place to get a procedure done after 2 games after having 5 months off. We'll see where he's at, but I can imagine he's going to be rusty, probably not in the best shape by any stretch. And I would would temper your expectations, but just nice to hear that he's going in the right direction.
Jake McCabe's out there as well, and this is good. Before practice begins, the PP staff working on the power play.
Weird. Yeah, I don't know, man. Every show could be centered around that so far this year. I mean, my concern right now with the PP is that it doesn't seem to be a lot of changes being made. They go out there and they do the same things, and it is not working. Like, I understand there's a lot of talent out there. I see it as well. That's part of the frustration. But when they don't seem to have anything that's visibly changed, and they literally, I mean, we all know what the definition of insanity is, right? They just
Yep.
they just keep going out there and just, I don't know, maybe something will change, and it doesn't. It's the same results, and they don't penetrate. They don't have a go-to play. They don't have a go-to anything. It's freewheeling it. At least it certainly looks like it. And I really thought that, when you bring Mark Savard in, whether his track record was phenomenal or not, the PP just needed a different voice. Sometimes just get a guy in there to run video a little differently. Hey, what about this option? I think this is really good. Here's your guys' strengths. What about opening this up? And how about we try to penetrate this? And if it's not there, it should open up this guy over here, and just have some different looks. And it looks like nothing. Like, it looks like they're all out there. It looks like they've never played together. And it looks like they're all just taking a stab at it every single rep. And my worry is that we're looking at the middle of January right now. We all know how quick, bang, bang, February, March goes. All of a sudden, we're the last 2 weeks of the season. This power play will burn your season down if you don't fix it. There's other deficiencies and positives in the season. And I mean, they're close. I mean, it's the John Tavares thing. Like, everyone laughed when he said they were close last year. They're a really good team at times. But if you don't fix that power play, if you go into the Stanley Cup playoffs with a abysmal power play, you're done. You're done, and it'll end their season, and it will be another horrendous feeling for everyone in Leafs Nation. It needs to be addressed, dude.
Too mechanical, too predictable. As mentioned, I was at the game. It's just like you can see it play out as it happens when the Maple Leafs are on the power play. It's like, here's a drop pass, here's the zone entry, here's the pass. I did like see them try to get, Matthews in the Braden Point spot, and it just, everything they've tried hasn't worked. You can keep filtering guys in and out, but it's the same sort of DNA to each power play. But you're so right. You're so bang on with that assessment. If they can't figure this out, ultimately it's going to cost them the season, plain and simple. Always a story, always a topic of conversation. Every postseason, can't score in the power play, can't score in general, and can't get that big save. And so they got about 40 some odd games here to figure this thing out. But sure and behold, like, they're just so far away from things, and the confidence is not there with the power play as well. I guess the positive news from over the weekend is Craig Berube said he was hopeful that Anthony Stolarz could start skating this week. Not to say that Hildeby's been bad, but I mean, there's been a bit of a drop-off going from Wall to Hildeby that we didn't see earlier on the year when we had Stolarz and Wall in the mix, right?
Yeah, I'm from what I could hear, it didn't sound like Hildeby played too bad. Watched the highlights and stuff too. Made some big saves when he could have let him in. But it's just not that pedigree of, we can rely on this guy. And they have been relying on their goaltenders. I
Yeah.
think all teams do, even good teams. You try not to, right? You try not to say, well, we don't need to shore up our D zone coverage because our goalie will take care of that. We don't need to be responsible because our goalie will take care of that. Odd man rushes are okay because our goalie will take care of that. You don't want to do that, and I don't think the Leafs are. But yeah, it's nice to have that feeling of just solid feeling back there, and we've had that very much with Woll and Stoli. Hildy's been fine, but obviously when Stoli comes back, we'll have that 1-2 punch again. And that's encouraging. And I really, I've kind of already wrapped my mind around the fact that our goaltenders are solid. We're going to get those saves. That's not going to be the storyline of the second half of the season or the playoffs. I just have faith in these guys that they're going to be solid. Both of them look solid. Like, I think we're really well rounded in the crease and defensively. Like, we had some D zone breakdowns, and we had certain players that we just felt like we couldn't even play. That seems to be have shored up and could even get better as time goes on, as we approach the deadline. So solid, and it's nice that Stoli's coming back. It seems like it's been a while. I think it'll still be a couple of weeks, but if you're starting to skate and we start to get Stoli back, he's, in my mind, if I just had to bet, I would say Stoli is going to be the number one guy in the playoffs, just based on the play that I've seen so far. And Obviously, injuries will play a factor in that, but it's nice to hear that he's going in the right direction.
Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button in support of Sick Kids. Tony Van Dinther, thank you so much for the super chat. Rosie, if you have coaching experience with a power play, do I have a job for you?
Well, the thing is, I'm far from a power play specialist, and I'm not going to say, oh, you put this guy here and you try to thread the seam there. I'm not going to say
Yeah.
that. Those guys are better suited to do those things. I get it, but I mean, it just doesn't seem like they're addressing it to the levels that I think they need to. That's kind of where I'm at. I see this power play and I see them do the same bullshit, and I can't believe my eyes. Like, we're 40 plus games into the season. It was terrible last season at certain points in time. It certainly cost them in the playoffs. Their numbers, I mean, we could have done a week of shows based on their power play in the playoffs. It cost them. And now we have the same thing going on. And it's like they don't really address it to the level that I feel they need to. They're not as concerned about it as everyone else that's there, which is kind of concerning. Maybe they're just playing it cool and not wanting to overreact and buy into the hoopla. But at the end of the day, everyone's looking at the same video here, and it's nowhere close. Like, they have zero chemistry, and the only time they had it was when Matthews wasn't on the power play, which is also quite a bit of a head scratcher. But
Yeah.
I just want to see change. And whether that's, I think I said last week, like, well, then, get Savard out of there. If he's not, if it doesn't seem like he's done anything, like there's no new setup or entry. And then with Berube, like, there's no accountability as far as they're making the same mistakes over and over again, like mind melting mistakes, like through the legs, winging it to no man's land, and they just step on it and go down. Like, no one does that, and they don't do that anymore on 5-on-5. So why are they not held to the same standard on the power play? I'm not sure, but I just wanted to see more change within that unit, and so far just simply haven't.
Utter train wreck so far, that power play so far in the first half of this regular season for the Maple Leafs. Make sure to join us in Music City Thursday, March 20th to Sunday, March 23rd, 2025. The first ever TLN Nation vacation. Rosie, what do you think the chances are we talk about the Maple Leafs power play while we do some live podcasting there from Love and Exile Winery Bar?
We will see. Hopefully we're talking about it in a positive light. I like to do more positive shows, man, but and we've done a lot of them this year.
We have. Yeah.
Team's been made lots of strides, looking really good in lots of areas, but it is the Maple Leafs, and as soon as you take another stride forward, your expectations go up, and your reminders of how long it's been, and the hesitation of like, ooh, do I get my hopes up again, starts to come into play. And that's the difficult thing about Toronto this day and age, in this era where they haven't won for so long. But we'll see how they do down in Vegas, and we'll be talking about whatever happens regardless. And I am very excited for it.
Yes, we are. A live podcast, winery tour, taking in the Toronto-Nashville game, all part of the experience and the package you would be buying. We have one with flights at $24.50 plus tax, one without $12.99 plus tax. Please note, hotel rooms are double occupancy. For more information on how to book, head on over to nationgear.ca or check out the link in our show bio. Life's too short for ordinary vacations. So as mentioned, not one but two guests on today's show. In about 15 from now, we're going to touch base with TSN hockey insider Darren Dreger. That's going to be a fun interview. So will Irfaan Gaffar, who covers the Vancouver Canucks for Canucks Army. Has some intel, obviously, on the Canucks and what's going on, the game on Saturday, and maybe some correlation, some connection with some former Canucks now with the Toronto Maple Leafs in the form of Chris Tanev and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. So that's coming up at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. This segment brought to you by our friends over at Greta Bar. Welcome back. Whether it's before or after or during the game, it's the place to be on King Street West. Awesome street food and wicked arcade games. 590 King Street West. Greta Bar. Let the games begin, Rosie.
Yes, excited to have a partnership again. We will have to get my arse down to Toronto and get in there and start to do some of the events that the potential is through the roof with that place. And as you're no stranger to its location, your favorite part of Toronto, I assume.
Yes. Okay. So where do you want to start with this game? And by that, do you want to talk about the actual game or the comments post game that raised some eyebrows that were gods in this market?
Did someone raise some eyebrows with some comments afterward?
Yes. Yes, pretty much. And the same person who had the gods comment in the offseason. Maybe we're misinterpreting what he had to say, but in summary, wasn't the best effort of the season. I thought it was like the Spider-Man gif. Again, I was at the game, two teams trying to play the same style. Vancouver capitalized, Toronto didn't. Kevin Lankinen makes 20 saves, made a couple of decent stops in that game. I thought the Leafs right away up against it, and the fact that Vancouver coming off putting on 14 shots on goal in a loss against Carolina, a shutout loss on Friday, come out and score 31 seconds into that game. I just didn't think the response or the juice was there from the Maple Leafs, and they end up going on to lose that game. The power play 0 for 3. That said, the Leafs didn't take a penalty, so I looked at that as a positive. But all in all, I think you look at that game, just not much to like in the form of the Maple Leafs taking a step forward, Rosie.
Yeah, it seemed like a bit of a snooze fest to my
It
ears
was.
listening on the radio. Not a lot of action, not a lot of jump, not a lot of compete. I imagine that Berube, in your mind as a coach, you want to have guys chomping at the bit and frothing at the mouth every single game. As soon as the puck drops, every line just comes firing like a bullet out of the barrel. And it doesn't always happen that way. But, timing and understanding the situation, like you said, they get blanked in Carolina, come in to their own barn on a Saturday night and against, you could call them a rival or a fellow Canadian team, and you just don't really have the gem. It is disappointing. That being said, you can't have, 82 game season. It becomes a slog. Guys have trouble getting up. The body's hurt, and it's not always there. And sometimes it lines up where everybody's kind of not feeling it that night. And it seems like the Leafs are in there right now. I've said before, the January, February, they are the dog days of the season. They're the games that are hard to get up for. You kind of, the cream's risen to the top. Things have kind of settled. You know where you sit relative to the rest of the league, rest of the conference, rest of the division. But you want to see better hockey all the time. They just didn't have it. Neither did the other side. It was a bit of a slog game. But let's be honest. That power play scores, a goal here or there and keeps them in the game, and all of a sudden it doesn't get away from them. I just think if your penalty kill is horrendous and you get scored on every time you give up a man advantage, that's just going to be the difference maker more often than not. Same thing with the power play. I mean, you got to take advantage when you get it, but I'm not hitting the panic button or anything. Again, these dog days, you don't always have it. Fine. I just want to see them come out of it in pretty big chunks. And they have done that, man. I mean, before the Carolina game, they're on a heater. They're on one. What do they won? 5 of 7 on the road and 6 in a row and blah, blah, blah. Like I don't like to lose sight of that too damn fast.
Yeah, the thing that irked me is that you should be frothing at the mouth, salivating. We talked about the travel woes, the Canucks, a desperate team, but really not showing much desperation. Killer instinct is the big phrase I would use from over the weekend, where it just felt like the Leafs had none of it. It like, how hungry are you? The old Serge Ibaka quote, where it's like, how hungry are you to win that game? And it just felt like across the board, they were just there. It was a Saturday night. They were there. And they expected to win. And because Vancouver was late to the party and showed up 4 or 5 hours before puck drop, unfortunately, this league doesn't work that way. And I understand, some games you're not going to have it, but I still think there's a level of PTSD with this market where you see that from this team and you're like, where is it from Matthews? Where is it from Marner? Where is it from Nylander? Where is it from Tavares across the board? You just don't see like that oomph. And I think it's always concerning, regardless if it's game 41 or 68 or game 3 of the playoffs, for that matter.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And consistency is key. And I think they've been better with consistency this year again. Yeah. Remember when they used to just drop games like to, you'd say the Blackhawks.
Arizona.
I mean, in years past, Arizona and Anaheim and some of the real dog teams of that season. It would happen all the time. They seem to have shored that up. I just remember being completely mindless out there with odd man rushes and turnovers and just dog shit play. It's not really that. It's just they don't quite have the, like you said, that frothing at the mouth. dog mentality where they're just ready to rock. And you would hope that they would after a pretty disappointing showing against Carolina. They didn't. Okay. Time to regroup. You got a week coming up here, starting with Dallas on Tuesday. It doesn't get easier. You don't get nights off in the NHL, but unfortunately, sometimes a group doesn't really have everything. Seems like they've gone through that. If it's a 2-game little skid and they sort it out on Tuesday, then what's all this hoopla about? Again, the only thing I'm actually genuinely concerned about right now is that power play. And I just have faith that what I've seen already throughout the season and things I've mentioned, these guys have got what it takes to get it back on track. Every teams, even really good teams, Stanley Cup winning teams, have these little slogs in January where they lose back-to-backs where they probably should have had better. I'm not sky is falling about that. It's my number one concern, that like the thing that actually worries me is that power play.
Which of these quotes are unlike the other? So I won't mention who said them, but the first one, I didn't think we had enough pace in the game or played with enough energy. Maybe it's travel or whatever. We need more life and energy. I didn't think we had that tonight. The second quote, not good enough. They outworked us, outcompeted us. That's why they won. The third quote, I liked it. I thought we played well. I really did. The last couple of games have been giving up plays to teams that aren't missing on them. What one was Mitch Marner's quote? Is there a delusion there, Rosie? Like, did I miss something? Again, I was at the game on Saturday. Admittedly, talking to fellow media members watching the game, I'm like, is this more Vancouver playing excellent in their brand and their style as opposed to the Leafs, shitting the bed? I think, honestly, it was somewhere in between. But that's a level of delusion I haven't seen since the summer in the Hockey Gods quote, where it's like, man, you guys have a whole different level you can get to than that game, and you thought it was good.
Yeah, and I mean, like Mitchie's not great with the media. He's not great with
Yeah.
his tone. He's not great with connecting to the cameras by any stretch of the imagination, which is tough to do when you're in Toronto. You'd like to have more of a Willie mentality or a Domi mentality where, you don't say things that are easy to jump on. But I mean, it's very clear that Mitch is trying to stay positive. He doesn't want to dwell. He doesn't want to act like the sky is falling. He doesn't want to act like he's frustrated. He doesn't. So in his mind, he's not going to give the media that by showing frustration. He's gonna keep it positive and keep it light. But he missed the mark.
You think?
He always misses the mark, and it's just the look on his face and his tone and the way he speaks when doing interviews is easy to rub people the wrong way. And he's often rubbed me the wrong way, and he kind of screws it up. At the end of the day, in my mind, he's trying to keep it positive and try to look at the positives and say that game could have gone another way. It just, the timing of it was piss poor, and it made me chuckle, and I had to do a double take, and I'm like, here we go. And then it's, how many days of Twitter storm making the memes and putting the quotes together and making him look even stupider than I think he deserves. But he just doesn't seem to do a very good job at helping himself out media wise.
It's it's delusion. Like, there's no other way to sugarcoat things than it's pure delusion, where you look at sort of what he said and you compare it to Tanev was a not good enough quote, and then Craig Ruby was the first quote I read. Like, how could you not be anywhere close to aligning with two main personnel within the team where they're discreet and they're honest and they're blunt, and then you come out and, like, you almost have the audacity to say that was like they played well. Like, they played. I could tell you they played. They were at that game, but considering what we've seen from this team, not only this season and recent memory, like, there is a way different level they can get to. I just think there was an element of delusion there. Like, that's the only word I can think of.
Yeah, and I think Mitchie just falls victim to having a poor choice of words at times, right? Like, I think, you put yourself in his shoes, and he's probably a guy that likes to stay positive. He doesn't like to admit that things are too bad. He doesn't like to go down the negative road, wants to keep it light and keep it positive. But I mean, you would like to hear him say, man, that just wasn't good enough tonight. Our effort level has to be better. It starts with me. I consider myself one of the leaders on these teams, and I pride myself on bringing my best every single night. That wasn't it. We're going to refocus here and figure out what went wrong. Have a good day of practice, have a day off, whatever it is. Get to watching the video, get our ducks back in a row, and come out with a much better effort, because I believe in this team. We're much better, and it starts with me. Like that's what people want to hear, and that's what he should say. But instead, he decides to go, well, I'm not going to be negative tonight, so I'm going to say X, and doesn't really realize, well, what's everyone else going to say? Is this going to open me up to criticism? And he seems to take the wrong road often, and at least choose the wrong words. I mean, like you mentioned, we're like gods here. Everyone twisted that into we are gods, and it's not what he said. It might not be fair with how much criticism he takes, but he doesn't do himself any favors. Wrong choice of words, wrong timing, wrong tone, and it's gonna bite him in this market. And I think it's not the first time it's bit him, which is why he's so jaded when he's talking to the media. It's why he's obviously annoyed. It's why he keeps it so cut and dry. And it's just not, he's not working the media real strongly as a player in a hotbed market who's got a lot of pressure on him. And I don't know who's going to help him with that. Probably nobody. But you'd think he'd learn after a while to stay away from some of those hot button things at certain times. And he doesn't really seem to get a feel of the temperature.
Yeah, maybe I'm different, but I honestly feel like he believed the team was good in that game. Right? How many times in recent memory, it's not just been him, specifically in the playoffs, or like, we're almost there. Like, to me, it's comparable to the John Tavares quote, right? We're close. What are you close to? Winning another, like, a round? Like, it's delusion. These guys are delusional.
And that's what I think I mentioned. Like, he says we're close. So what have they done? It's the same group of guys, and now they're at times where they're leading the Eastern Conference. So are you going to say that the Leafs aren't close to being like a serious contender? They are. If we dissect it with a fine-tooth comb, you can find deficiencies. But I mean, if you go dissect Dallas in that sense, or if you dissect Colorado in that sense, you're gonna find the same things, but we just scrutinize over Toronto more. So to hear them have a first round exit, which was pretty pathetic, not pathetic. I mean, game 7 and everything, but their power play, it was, oh god. But you tweak a little bit, which they have, and all of a sudden they're close. And I believe they'll get through the first round this year. So I think that's what John's talking about. But we scrutinize so hard, and it is this market and it is this media, and the fans, the fan base, they don't want to hear that shit. They've been distraught year after 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 year. Like, it's insanity, right? They haven't won ever in anyone's lifetime, realistically. So to hear that shit drives people bananas. I get it, but also on the player side of things, I kind of also get where they're trying to lean towards as far as being an athlete and a competitor, and keep things positive and realize how thin the margins are, I guess. And it doesn't drive me as nuts, but I certainly chuckle when I hear it saying, oh boy, you're probably going to pay for that one in a lot of the media spaces.
Rosie, we have new lines at practice. Steven Lorentz is your number one left winger. He's playing with Matthews and Marner. Then you have Nyes, Tavares, Nylander, McMahon, Domi, Robertson, Dewar, Kampf, and Reeves. And it looks like Max Pacioretty again is going to be a healthy scratch, and Pontus Holmberg. I agree with Pacioretty, just hasn't been the same player the last couple times out. No spark, no jump, not playing very direct. So I see the reasoning, but again, you're just looking for answers, and I know what they're trying to do with having Lorentz on that top line, trying to get those big two going, because those guys have been floundering the last couple games.
Yeah, this is just a response to a couple of ugly performances where it's unacceptable. And all right, we're not going to go business as usual. It's not going to be the same thing everyone's used to. We're going to throw something at the wall here and shake things up and get guys to kind of wakey and realize that it's just kind of a message being sent. I can see this from Berube. Lorentz, who has been pretty much permanent fourth liner on this team, is now on the first line. It's like, you guys want to play like that? Now we really have to struggle to figure out something to get this team and get this group going to the level of expectations that are set in front of them. And that's what this is to me. Trying something completely different, off the wall. We got to shake things up is exactly what it is. I don't mind it. I don't expect it to be long-term. We'll see how long it lasts, but a great opportunity for Steven Lorentz, who, has had moments certainly this year where he shows like he's got a lot of upside, a lot to give. Is he a first liner to play with those guys? Absolutely not. But here's an opportunity where Chief is clearly shaking things up, whether that's to rattle people's cages or not. Not sure. We'll see how it goes, but I don't mind the change.
Feels like you've had a really zen weekend. I'm trying my best to antagonize you on today's show. It's just not working. But Zach Phillips writes in, That's what you love to see. Steven Lorenz having to be the spark plug for $23 million worth of superstar players, superstars in quotations. So that's where we're at here in Leafs Nation.
Yeah, that's fair, man. That's fair. I think my thing is, we talk about the power play, and I mentioned, like, get Savard out of there and bring someone else in. Like, what could it hurt? And people are like, oh, it's the players, it's this and that. It's like, well, maybe, but what can you change today? What can I do right now? And
Yeah.
it isn't change the players out. Like, you want to start talking about having a different core group of players. Okay, well then you want to fast forward 5 years before that's even remotely possible. I'm not really interested in having that conversation right now. I'm talking about what can we do right bloody now to fix a problem. And I get why Lorentz is up there. I get why they're rattling the cages, and that makes sense to me. But my thing, instead of pointing at things that you can't change, well, that's pointless. Point at things that you can change, which is why, whether it's the players or the coaches or whatever the reason is, there's nothing you can do about one thing. So let's try to address the next one. And that's why my mentality towards Marc Savard coming in here to save the power play, and it's as dog shit as ever. Well, maybe someone else needs to be a voice. Something needs to be sparked, but you're not changing the players right now. So what's the point of even talking about that?
Good point. We move on. The following interview is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. Get custom ring build and delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece program and an unbeatable pricing policy. Charm Diamond Centers is proudly Canadian owned and operated since 1972 with more than 85 locations across the country through Charm and their sister brands. For more information, go to charmdiamondcenters.com. As you bring in from TSN Hockey Insider, it is Darren Dreger. Dregs, what's going on, buddy? How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. How are you guys?
We're decompressing over the weekend, dissecting what's transpired in this market. We're doing well, though. Your thoughts on Steven Lorenz on the top line here with Matthews and Marner?
Well, I mean, it's clearly Craig Berube just trying to shake things up a little bit, right? It was interesting, the takeaway from Saturday night's no-show against the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, that one was, as Berube explained afterwards, just, emotionless. There was no energy in that game. There didn't seem to be a whole lot of direction. You got that from Chris Tanev. So I think this is just, the head coach not delivering a message, but just shaking it up a little bit. What's wrong with throwing an energy guy like Steven Lorenz up into the top six? And in this case, with the best players, what is you can't have a repeat performance from what we saw Thursday against the Carolina Hurricanes after the first 10 minutes. And a game like Saturday, where it's an all-Canadian matchup. You've got the Vancouver Canucks, who had to deal with a little bit of travel adversity come in. And on home ice, there's just no emotion in that game. You can't have that. So why not try something different?
Yeah, and you think the Leafs are falling victim right now, Dregs, to just the dog days of the season, and they're positioned pretty well. They know where they sit, and they take a couple days off. Is that concerning to you, or is there more to it than that?
No, I don't think there is a whole lot more to it unless it continues, right? And let's give them the benefit of the doubt and believe that it can't and it won't, because the body of the work suggests that it shouldn't, right? I look at the play of that top line. I thought when Matthews came back after the latest aggravation that he was playing his best hockey of the year. Like, physically, you could see where he was swinging at pucks and he was diving and he was doing all the things physically that we're used to seeing him do. Marner, even with Matthews on the sidelines, was the driver of the team from a point perspective. Power play 5-on-5. I mean, he just seemed to grab this team offensively by the nose. But in the last 3-4 games, we haven't seen as much of that. So I think, Rosie, it does have a little bit to do with the dog days. And every team, it doesn't matter if you're fighting for a division lead, top spot in the National Hockey League, or you're a bottom dweller, you go through these stretches, don't you, where you've got a 3 or a 4 or a 5 game stretch where, you win a couple in those 5 game segments that maybe you shouldn't have, but you don't allow a 5 game seg to turn into anything more than that. The good teams don't. So that's why I wasn't surprised by what I saw Berube do earlier today. But I am intrigued to see what he's going to do in game and what other adjustments he may have to make.
What did you make of Marner's post-game comments?
I was a little surprised, to be fair. I don't know if it was Marner trying to deliver a message that, guys, it really wasn't as bad as what you think it is or what some others think. That's also, minutes after the game had ended. It was a complete separation from what we heard from Chris Tanev, from what we heard from the head coach. And so I can take snippets of what Marner said, and I can apply that to what I saw against Carolina and how he feels like in certain areas they were better against the Vancouver Canucks, maybe, but I'm not really buying what he's selling. And look, this isn't a PR push by me by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not sure I'd have had him out there post game after the Vancouver game. Because you know what the message is going to be. You have a pretty good handle on what Berube is going to say post game. So you go to a veteran player like Chris Tanev. Maybe you go to Morgan Riley or Oliver Ekman-Larsson or somebody else. Like Mitch, and the captain is different. Austin Matthews pretty much has to be accountable from a PR perspective day in and day out. That's part of the leadership and the pressure that comes with wearing the C of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't know that Marner has to be out there every single day. If he does, maybe you say, hey, Mitch, I have thoughts on what you're going to say going out there, and you police it, you manage it a little bit better, because unfortunately for Marner, even though I think we can read into what we think he was trying to say. For the last couple of years, unfairly, I might submit, I understand the lack of playoff production and why he has been vilified at times, but he's that beacon in this city, right? He just is. And no matter how well he plays, the points he puts up, just a mere slip, if we're willing to call it that, in a post-game comment, has all the naysayers and his critics coming out swinging, because it did feel like a disconnect and almost an assault on our reality who watched the game.
Yeah, I think poor timing from old Mitchie sums it up for me. Trying to do something a little different, stay positive. It ends up blowing up in his face, as he doesn't seem to be great with that kind of thing. But staying with the theme of Mitch, who's involved, this power play, I'm starting to genuinely worry about it. It cost them the series last season, you could say, with numbers that are like under 5%, like abysmal. Bring in a guy to try to fix this or get it back on track, and it's been nothing but as bad or worse. What's your level of concern about the Maple Leafs power play?
Well, how can you not be concerned, right? Because, as you guys know, when you get into the tough games and you get into the playoffs, as difficult as it is to earn the man advantage of the power play, when you've got the talent that Craig Berube has access to with the Toronto Maple Leafs, it can't be that bad. It just cannot be. It's got to find a way to just click every now and again. And what we've seen in the last few games, especially, and it goes deeper than that, but maybe it's more glaring because we're really driving this thing to the microscope, right? Is that there's a disconnect. Like there's just a lack of feel. There's a lack of everything. I'd like to have access to Mark Savard, to be fair. I mean, he's the coach of the power play. I've yet to meet an NHL head coach who doesn't have influence or some level of say over what the structure of that power play looks like. And to me, that's what's most glaring. Is at times it does look like it lacks structure, and it lacks any sort of direction as to, okay, look, and you heard Berube preach on this early in the year. Like, why does it always have to be, the most kind of theatrical power play in the league? And they're not trying to do that now, but sometimes it's just simple, right? Get the puck to the net, find a way, put a big body like Matthew Nyes or somebody else out front that's going to do the damage. They had Matthews net front. I like the look of that. There's nothing wrong with that. He can get a deflection here or there. So it's going to be a constant work in progress, but I'm more curious as to why it hasn't worked and what they're working on to try and figure it out. Is there too much being put in the heads of these players or not enough? Rosie, one thing that players like, and it doesn't matter if it's penalty kill, 5-on-5, or the power play, you do have to have a certain amount of structure that you can lean on. Just the simple stuff on a power play. Okay, well, it's not working, so let's go back to this. And then slowly but surely you generate your confidence off that, and maybe it does start to click.
For sure. And I mean, I'm no power play expert, but I've been around a lot of them. I've seen a lot of them. And when they're struggling as bad as a team is like this for a prolonged period of time, you would think that you could visually see them trying to simplify, trying to stick to a certain thing just to get back to the roots, see if you can get something going and then take off from there. But I don't see that. I don't see what they're I don't see what their breakout, their entry, their setup. I don't see it being the same way twice. I see them coming up different sides, setting up with different guys, different looks all the time. And I just sit there and question going,
Yeah.
what are they talking about in between games? Like, clearly they know what their numbers are. They know they're not scoring on the power play and it's floundering and it hasn't been what the expectations are. So, and what have they done about it? And I just don't see a whole lot at all, to be honest. It still feels like they're freewheeling it, making it up as they go.
Yeah, and I'm with you, and that's why again, it'd be nice to hear from Savard, or I mean, Berube is clearly the guy that delivers the message from a coaching perspective, and he's probably growing tired of trying to have to explain it. Maybe what Marner was talking about again, if he reflects on the Vancouver Canucks game solely, was that Carolina game prior, Toronto was giving up shorthanded chances left, right, and center, that's just unacceptable. That's unacceptable. There was less of that in the Vancouver game, but still it didn't produce. So we need to hear more as to what they're working on. And sometimes that gets delicate too, right? The coach is planning some sort of strategy for the next game he's about to play. He's not going to open his book to the media and say, okay, well, here's what we're going to try tonight, because this hasn't worked for the last 10 games. So it's clearly a work in process.
Do you get the sense that Marc Savard's on the hot seat, or do you think this organization could be proactive in trying to help figure this thing out? Like, I've been bringing up the name, a guy you work with right now, in Bruce Boudreau. Like, why wouldn't you? I mean, there's no cap for personnel or coaches, right?
Yeah, I hear you. And look, we in the media always want to try and fix from the outside, because when you fire a coach, there damn well better be somebody better that you're bringing in to replace that coach. I don't think that's happening anytime soon. I just don't. I don't believe that for a second. And I do think that the answers are there internally. And look, I mean, not to bring up a ghost from the past, but one thing I often used to give Mike Babcock credit for, this is going more back into the Detroit Red Wings days, when he had access to Nick Lidstrom and Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterberg and all these great Red Wings players. I remember walking by, and it might have been in the playoffs. I guess it must have been walking by the coach's office and seeing Babcock with those guys in front of a monitor. And he came out after the fact, and I said, "Hey, like, what were you doing there with those three guys?" And he goes, "Well, I was trying to get what they're seeing, what their ideas are to fix the power play." And he goes, "I'm not out there. I don't see what they see. So I want their input so that I'm a smarter coach when, I call the group together." Is that happening on a regular basis with Savard and Berube and Matthews and Marner and all these great hockey minds within the Maple Leafs? I assume it is. So, Nick, I don't believe that there's anything imminent in terms of a personnel change. And look, you often will see in season where a coach will take over duties, right? Berube may not like the messaging, the direction, and maybe Savard pushes back on occasion because, hey, that's my turf. You stay out of my turf. And the head coach say, "No, hold on a minute. I'm the head coach. I'm going to make the call." I'm sure there have been some difficult conversations, but I don't think you'll see a personnel change anytime soon.
Dregs, as we head, closer and closer, it's the dog days, but you know how quick they go. The first half come and gone, and we're into the second, but the trade deadline is going to be here before we know it. Not really a secret that the Leafs are looking for, depth at center. Is there any names that maybe people haven't talked about that are on your radar?
Not really, to be fair. I mean, the one thing that collective media does a good job of is sorting through individually across the 32 teams the names that you conceivably can see in play. And really that's what managers and pro scouts do too, right? You assemble your list, and a lot of times it's contractually related. Who's on expiring contracts, who's going into the final year of their deal, guys that you think you can afford, maybe a guy that appears to be a perfect fit. And when you boil it down for the Maple Leafs, I mean, what we're looking at here is a prototypical third line center. Now, the third line center that might be the most affordable, seems like a decent fit for the pro scouts or for management, may not be the same guy that, say, Craig Berube is looking at, right? When you visualize the type of game that Berube wants to play, it's that heavier style. He's going to want somebody in that bottom six at center who can play that heavier game. So when I'm looking at the list of names out there, and I threw out Ryan Strome the other day, I know others have talked about him. There's this hint of what if a Ryan O'Reilly was willing to come back to Toronto? I mean, go down the list of the players that could be in play. You're talking about a class of players, Scotty Laughton of the Philadelphia Flyers, who come in around that 6'1" range. Well, I mean, that's not a small player, but I look at Nick Bjugstad, depending on what happens with Utah. He's 6'5". I mean, he would tick a lot of boxes, I think, from a management standpoint and a coaching perspective, assuming that Utah is going to have any interest in moving a player like that.
I think naturally, do you know what this team is open to dealing? Like, are they open to Minton, Cowan? I know they're pretty scarce in picks as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting into the Minton or the Cowan conversation, certainly Fraser Minton, I think that's a high rent conversation, isn't it? And that's when you're looking down the highway and you're looking at Dylan Cousins, or you're looking at a bigger piece where it's going to take multiple assets to make a trade like that. I know the Maple Leafs have a ton of time for both those kids in Fraser Minton and in Easton Cowan, as they should. And I don't think that Brad Treliving wants to move off his first round draft pick. Not saying he won't. He may have to, depending on who the right piece is. But look, I mean, Philadelphia, again, to use Scotty Laughton as Exhibit A, the Flyers don't necessarily love the idea of trading Scott Laughton because he's a great mentor type player for their young guys. He's good in so many different areas. And prototypically, when you look around the league, he's viewed as a third line center. Yet you look at the last few weeks anyway, he's been on the wing for the Philadelphia Flyers. Noah Cates has kind of developed and evolved into that center. And I don't think Toronto, like a lot of general managers, Treliving, isn't interested at this stage in giving up a first-round draft pick for Scott Laughton. So, Nick, it's still pretty early, but when you're thinking of trade and you're thinking of the pieces that Toronto needs, if you're not willing to part with a good draft pick or a decent prospect or a good young NHL player, then chances are you're not going to get the piece that you're looking for, you're looking to add when the playoffs come around.
Well, this you're right, and this year is unique too with the Four Nations. I just had a couple more from you. Do you expect league-wide activity over the next couple weeks? I know a lot of people have been indicating maybe there's like a secondary trade deadline ahead of the Four Nations.
Yeah, and I don't know what to think of that or what to make of it. I think that there wouldn't be many general managers who are sitting there going, all right, well, hey, Four Nations is right around the corner. It'd be great if we had our roster set so that everybody had a break and a reset during the Four Nations. We come back after that, pedal to the metal, let's get ready for the playoffs, as opposed to the guy who's like, well, no, you know what? I'm just going to sit tight. I mean, when the deal is in front of you, that makes sense and you can afford to make that deal, you make that deal. That's what it boils down to. In certain situations, like the Maple Leafs, where you're a cap team, it does come down to affordability and dollar in, dollar out. So is that perfect scenario in front of Brad Treliving now? Will it be before the Four Nations takes hold of the league? We don't know that. What I do know is that he's constantly on the phone, like most general managers, and works pretty hard at trying to find the right fit. But I'm reminded of the deal that Billy Guerin and the Minnesota Wild made with the Columbus Blue Jackets for Juracek going to the Wild. And we had Guerin on our podcast to talk about just, his philosophy, which he learned, by the way, from Jim Rutherford while in Pittsburgh. And he said, I always go into a trade conversation thinking, all right, what's the best case to make this fair so that both sides win the trade? And that's how you get a return customer. And you feel good about the trade that you made because you didn't try and fleece the other guy. That's why deals don't often get done, is because one team digs in thinking, well, I can't give up that asset. If I give up that asset, then I didn't win the trade. Maybe it's a wash at best. What's wrong with a wash? If you can get a player that makes your team better and you've got to give up a quality asset to acquire that player that makes you better right now, do it. That's how I would hope a lot of general managers do their jobs, and I'm not sure many do.
And just to wrap, Dregs, Anthony Stolar's starting to think about his return. Do you have anything concrete on his timeline?
Not really. And let's throw Jake McCabe into that mix too, right? I like the approach here with McCabe. If we start with him, they have to be smart with this type of injury, right? I mean, there's history now with McCabe. So I doubt very much like we'll see him before Saturday. I think Saturday is what, the Montreal Canadiens.
Yep.
And how do you target any game? But that's likely the best case scenario. Stolar's getting set to skate. It's going to be, how does he feel, and then how quickly can he get into their normal practice routine, and then what way do you go from there? Does he need 2 practices? Does he need 3 before you fire him back into the rotation? I think they're certainly not going to rush him. So to say that, well, if Toronto doesn't turn this thing around, then maybe that expedites his return. Nope, they can't do that. They know what they have in that 1-2 tandem of Stolars and Woll, or Woll and Stolars. They loved it when those 2 guys were healthy and they could rotate. So regardless of what his situation is, the fact that he's ready to get back onto the ice is great, but he won't be pushed or rushed back. I was told that, they were hopeful that he could play a game in January, and that was a few days ago. Worst case, early February. And I'm not sure they've deviated from that. So maybe it gets a little better when he is back on the ice and back in practice.
Dregs, you're the absolute best. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Okay, guys. Thank you. Be well.
Appreciate
you
it
as well. Darren Dreger from TSN, always bringing the heat here on the podcast. Lots to break down from that chat, whether it's Stolars. Like I wouldn't even be shocked in the Stolars front if like they let this play out and make sure this guy is really, really ready. And if you can get some adequate goaltending in the meantime, I think you're okay with that decision too.
Yeah, that's the luxury they have right now, right? With where they're sitting in the playoffs and they've got 2 very competent goaltenders and, I think a competent backup too in Hildeby right now. So it's not like there's anyone pulling their hair out over trying to rush Stolar's back. I mean, like you said, you got to look long term about it. It's all about the playoffs. We don't want to have a scenario where you rush a guy back for no reason and set him back, inevitably costing the team. So I think they're going to be patient with him, but by all accounts, he seems to be on schedule.
I had to give credit to Carter Hutton for calling it. He thought Hildeby would get the call on Saturday, and he was so correct on Friday. And maybe it's because they got Dallas tomorrow, they got New Jersey on Thursday, and maybe there's another spot for Hildeby next Saturday against the Montreal Canadiens, who have been on fire, right?
Yeah, that could make sense too, right? Just looking at where the games fall, you can't ride like nobody rides one goalie that hard, let alone Joseph Woll, who is kind of your last line right now and has injury prone seasons and injuries himself. So I would not be surprised. And if you look at it, like you say, they got a heavy schedule, but then that Montreal game again, it puts them on the spot a little bit pressure wise, but it would make sense to do the exact same thing here and ride Woll for a couple and then get Hill to be back against Montreal Canadiens, just where they are in the standings. I know it's a big game and it means a lot to people, but that could very well be a possibility.
Meantime, we're still dissecting Saturday night's game, a 3-0 win for the Vancouver Canucks following a game where they sort of no-showed against Carolina. They had 14 shots on goal in that game, but a really good response despite the travels. To talk more about that, the Canucks moving forward, and also some Maple Leafs, here's the Nation Network's Irfaan Gafar. What's going on, Irf?
Fellas, how we doing? Good morning.
Doing well. I heard over the weekend, I guess Elias Pettersson's in the running for the Selke because he blocked a shot on Saturday. Is that true?
It was a pretty good defensive effort from Elias Pettersson. I don't know if it was blocked a shot. Leafs didn't have that many, so I'm not entirely sure if it was a big one. But I think when you see the effort from the player who's got a lot of scrutiny over the last little while, I think that's why his teammates were reacting the way they were. But all in all, I think from this side of the country and people that watch the Vancouver Canucks, I think it was a good news story. On the other side, maybe not so much.
And what is it about the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Vancouver Canucks when they go head to head? It seems to put people, I don't know, I look at the Canucks fans, they seem to get in a little bit of a tizzy about Vancouver. Is it just that East versus West thing, or is there more going on there?
It's always East versus West. I think that, it's Toronto, it's Vancouver, we're the little brother out here. It's the big smoke out in Toronto. That was the first franchise shutout win in Toronto in history of the Vancouver Canucks on Saturday. So it's never happened, right? I mean, and also the Leafs stink when they come to Vancouver, right? It's just always one of those things. But I think the fans, they like it. I think that there was a lot made about the 4:00 starts, things changing earlier here in Vancouver to make sure it was 7 p.m. local in Toronto. But look, I think it's fun. I think it's great for the game when you have two teams and two huge markets that know and that are, I guess we can say, knowledgeable about their team. Sometimes maybe not so much, but yeah, and I think it was a fun game to watch.
Curious to get your opinion, obviously covering the Canucks,
Yeah.
but just your interpretation of the game, because we went over the comments earlier on. Craig Berube and Chris Tanev had sort of a different feel as opposed to like a Mitch Marner. But, I was there for the game. I actually gave a lot of more credit to the Vancouver Canucks than people have been giving the last couple of days, and just the style, the brand they played. They were dialed in defensively in that game.
Rick Tocchet has a couple phrases that he always says. He says, meet pressure with pressure and take care of the guts of the ice. And that's exactly what the Vancouver Canucks did. By all accounts, they had absolutely no business winning that hockey game, right? You lose ugly in Carolina the night before. Your travel situation is absolutely hooped. The broadcast showed the empty dressing room at 11 a.m., maybe at least twice on the broadcast. So the Canucks had absolutely no business winning that game on paper. They went out there and they played a really good defensive game. They got saves when they needed to from Kevin Lankinen. They got a lucky goal from Brock Besser, but he'll take it. And the goal that Quinn Hughes was able to assist for Kiefer Sherwood, Max Domi absolutely caught watching Quinn Hughes do his thing on that goal. And then, you just see them shut it down. The Leafs couldn't generate anything through the middle. They couldn't generate anything on the power play. That's also, you guys know that's been a story of this team for the last little while. So I give credit to the Vancouver Canucks a little bit, but when your best players for one team were your best player, better than your best players for the other team, it definitely showed. And Chris Tanev was right. They definitely got outworked. They might have got outcoached a little bit too.
Now, I'm sure you guys are probably almost tired of it, but to the rest of the league, this is a problem that hasn't been rectified yet. How do you see this Pettersson-Miller situation playing out at the end of the day?
Yes, Jay. Very tired. Absolutely exhausted. Look, I think that something's got to give at some point, whether it's the trading of one player, two players, or both. I think that you might see one, but there's also a possibility here where Elias Pettersson goes off and he, uses this Toronto game as a springboard to play some really good hockey. JT Miller was not the lowest ice time guy, but he didn't play a lot. But I think that was circumstance. There was a lot of PK time. 5-on-5, he wasn't really doing that much, but they ended up winning the game, so no one really cares. I think the rumors out there are definitely true. I think that, they've taken calls on JT Miller. Teams have called about Elias Pettersson, and the Canucks are going to have to make a decision, right? They're going to have to make a decision on where they see their franchise going, who is their number one center, and if there really is a serious offer for either player. I think if there's something that they like, if there's something that, they absolutely think that, they're going to get what they want from the player, then they'll go ahead and think about it. But there was a notion that the Canucks weren't going to trade into the West either. But I don't think that should be a thing at all. It's not like Calgary, Edmonton here, where you don't want to trade to your absolute rival. I think that if there's a deal that's out there and the GM's willing to make it and it's going to help your franchise for years to come, you go and do that every single time.
I love playing armchair GM. Is there any chance in hell that the Leafs and the Canucks get together on a JT Miller trade? Elias Pettersson, no thanks. I think I don't know. I think it's tough. It's tough for me to get behind a guy who needs motivation. He makes $11.6 million a year, and you don't know what guy's going to show up. And not to harp on the guy, he's an excellent player, but JT Miller is like your prototypical playoff player. Do you think there's any chance the Leafs and Canucks hook up on something here?
No. I don't think so. I think I think the assets are probably going to be too big. And if you really look at it, where do you play JT Miller? Like, how far down the lineup do you move a guy that's having a career year like John Tavares? Like, how much are you going to want to mess with the juju of the Leafs? And I know that, this team is built differently. They're good. They've got a lot of depth down the middle, but that's two centers, right? And you probably have to get rid of one for sure, right? So who's coming back the other way if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs? I just don't see a situation where that one's going to work. I think the Canucks would probably want, for a guy like JT Miller, another asset coming back, a top defenseman. You're not giving up Christopher Tanev, and that's exactly what the Canucks need, right? So I think
we'll give you a lightly used Morgan Riley. He's from BC. How about that?
Yeah, the bring Morgan thing home kind of left a long time ago. I think there's a lot of other BC kids. Bowen Byram, bring Bowen home is the new one here in Vancouver.
Okay.
Oh dear. What's you mentioned Tanev, seeing Tanev and seeing OEL and the success they're having in Toronto, being familiar with them. What's your take on those couple of D-men that are in Toronto nowadays?
Wish nothing but the best for both of them. I've had dealings with both those guys. Absolutely great human beings off the ice. They're on the ice play. Chris Tanev is exactly what you see. I mean, he's a prototypical old school defenseman. He really is. The guy eats pucks for a living, doesn't complain about it. There's the shot a couple weeks ago about him taking a puck in the face, the gum coming out of his mouth. That's hockey, baby, is it not? Right. Yeah, and I think that you look at a guy like OEL here in Vancouver, he really got the bad end of the stick. Like, that was the trade that Jim Benning wanted for a couple of years. And then he was finally able to go and pull it out and make it work. And things just didn't work for Oliver Ekman-Larsson here. But then he finds a situation in Florida where he doesn't have to be the guy. You don't need to be dependent on. You're not a big money guy. That all stuff's put behind you. You go and you have a good defense in front of you. He was running the power play there when Ekblad was hurt. And he wins the Stanley Cup. So you have that experience now. You have a guy where he can come in here. He doesn't need to be the guy, right? He's not dependent on every single night, and he can just go out and play hockey.
Yeah, my perception of OEL prior to Florida was that he was soft as baby shit, man. I know he's an all-star as a Coyote for years, but like that's been the biggest difference for me is just how physical he is and how much snarl he has to his game. And we think it's a Paul Maurice thing, but has that shocked you beyond belief knowing what you knew about the guy in Arizona and also in Vancouver?
I mean, he was an all-star in Arizona because you look at, no disrespect to the rest of the guys there in Arizona, OEL was the guy. However, having said this, Connor Garland's turned himself into having himself a pretty good career here in Vancouver so far. But yeah, you're right. I mean, look, I think that, the book on OEL was soft. He was a guy that didn't like getting into the dirty areas. But I think you're right. Like, you got a point there with Paul Maurice. Like, I think with that Florida team, the way that team was built, how hard they were to play against, it almost – you have to jump to that level. Like, you got to be on board. Otherwise, you're not going to play games. I mean, you've played, right? If guys on your team are going, you have a team where you go into the locker room and every single guy is like, this is the game where we're going to play hard. This is the guy where no one's going to beat us. Your man is never going to get taken advantage. Your guy's never going to be able to beat you. I think that's something that, players can gravitate towards. And OEL definitely took exception to that and had himself a great year with Florida.
Yeah, it's been a positive addition. So has Chris Tanev, but we sort of expected that on the Leafs blue line. Last but not least, I mentioned doing some great work here with the Nation Network, Down to Earth. Tell us about that and what's coming up on Down to Earth as well.
It's been fun, man. It's something that I've kind of been wanting to do for a while. And then, the opportunity came up with the Nation Network kind of late last summer, and we kind of decided to move forward with it. Had Biz, we've had Bieksa, we've obviously had Jeff Merrick from The Sheet. Got Mike and Spencer Gillis coming up, sat down and did that interview last week. So it's really interesting. Mike had some really, really good things to say about mental health. And, obviously he was at the helm of the Vancouver Canucks when Rick Rippon passed away, when he sadly took his own life. Spencer Gillis represents 25 women in the PWHL. So obviously an interesting story there. And then we have Travis Green coming up as well. So I'm really excited for that. He's a guy that coached here in Vancouver I know really well, and then, split some time in New Jersey, and now the head coach in a really weird team that is the Ottawa Senators.
All I can say is hopefully Greeny's got some good Wi-Fi. We had him on when he joined, got that job in Ottawa. I don't know what the fuck was going on, man. There was some stuff in the background there, but we'll leave it at that. Irf, excellent stuff, man. Congratulations on the project. You're killing it, man. And we'll talk soon, okay?
All right, gentlemen. Be well.
Thanks, Irf.
You as well. That's Irfaan Gafar from Canucks Army, of course, Down to Earth as well. So make sure you check that out. But two really, really fun interviews on today's show. And I think we did a pretty decent job, Rosie, of dissecting whatever the hell that was on Saturday night.
Tried not to burn it down. I was a little more positive than I think you were expecting. But again,
which is a bit surprising, by the way. I thought you were going to be like scorched earth.
I get more frustrated at body language and actions and maybe stuff that doesn't show up on the radio. Maybe that's what's saving this deal here is me not going scorched earth on them, being as I had to listen and not watch. But again, 2 games, like Dreger said, it's not a problem until it becomes a problem. And a little 2-game slide here. Yeah, they should have had a better response after the Carolina game. They didn't. Let's see where they go this week before we start really getting down on them.
I love Crit Commanda in the chat. Oh, the pig farm for Travis Green. That was an all-time interview. There was some like weird distorted sound coming in. It sounded like there was pigs behind him. And remember, he wouldn't do it on camera either. It was just audio.
Yeah, weird. I don't know what the story was there, but we're learning all kinds of funny things doing this digital media life.
Yeah. Irf and Greeny are really, really good friends. So thank you to Irfaan Gafar for coming on, as well as Darren Dreger. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase today. The one bet I was looking at here as I look over at Bet365, I'm going to take a shot on the Los Angeles Kings. I know it's 3-4 for them, but the Edmonton Oilers, the home team in that game, another potential first-round matchup again. I got to take my shot with LA just because Edmonton's coming back from out east and the Kings coming off a loss to Calgary over the weekend.
Interesting. I like it. Well, hey, I was going to go head-to-head with you, and I was going to take the Edmonton Oilers in regulation. So why don't we leave it at that, and we'll come in tomorrow morning and see what came to fruition. I just I don't know. I think that the Oilers are going to start to show who they are, and they are very solid. And they got two guys in there who can win games all by themselves. So got a little bit of goaltending, and I think that's a W in regulation. So we will see. But I get where you're coming from on your take. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Sounds good, Rosie. We'll reconvene coming up on Tuesday. We're going to tee up the Leafs and the Dallas Stars. That's the most positive news I can tell you on today's show. Knock on wood. The Leafs always play Dallas well. We know the numbers. You hate the numbers. I always bring up the numbers. And Nick Robertson, anytime goal. I'm already playing that for tomorrow. So.
Ooh, baby, against his big brother. He scored last game too, didn't he?
He did. He scores a lot against Dallas. That's the only team he scores against.
Yeah, I don't mind it, man. I don't mind it. In for some positivity tomorrow. Tune in.
Yes, sir. The Dallas Stars in town. It's going to be their third in 4 nights. They lost to Ottawa yesterday after beating the Montreal Canadiens in the shootout on Saturday. So once again, many thanks to Darren Dreger and Irfaan Gafar for dropping by the show. Folks in the chat, incredible as per usual at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Don't forget as well to visit theleafsnation.com. Thank you to producer Vic. For Jay Rosehill, I'm Nick Alberga. We'll talk tomorrow. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.